The arrangement, Olivia Novak stared at the email, her stomach dropping with each reread. After 3 years establishing herself at one of New York's premier architecture firms, her visa extension had been denied. In 30 days, she'd have to leave the country, right when she was about to lead the restoration of the historic Patterson Theater, the very project that had drawn her from Prague to America. There has to be a solution, she murmured, fingers combing through her auburn hair as she paced her small apartment overlooking the East River. Across town, Julian Westbrook sat in his father's former office, now his after William Westbrook's unexpected retirement. At 34, Julian was the youngest CEO in Westbrook Development's history, and the board wasn't hiding their skepticism. Conservative old men in expensive suits who questioned every decision, who reminded him constantly that stability inspired confidence among investors. Your father was married by 26, Board Chairman Reynolds had noted pointedly that morning. Family values are part of this company's foundation. Julian loosened his tie, exhaling slowly. His personal life wasn't their business, but perception mattered. Especially now with the Patterson Theater. Restoration hanging in the balance, their first venture into historical preservation rather than demolition and new construction. You're both completely screwed, said Daniel Park, architectural consultant and the only person who knew both their predicaments. He leaned back in his chair at the small cafe where the three had gathered at his insistence. Unless what? Olivia asked, hope flickering in her eyes. Unless you help each other out. Daniel looked between them. Olivia needs to stay in the country. Julian needs to appear settled and responsible. Julian narrowed his eyes. You can't possibly be suggesting marriage, Daniel said, shrugging as if suggesting they share a cab. A temporary arrangement. You get your stability image, Olivia gets her visa, and in 2 years when the Patterson project is done and Julian's proven himself to the board, you quietly divorce. That's insane, Julian said, though his mind was already calculating the potential benefits. It's fraud, Olivia countered, though her voice lacked conviction. It's a business arrangement, Daniel corrected. You'll live together, share expenses, attend necessary functions as a couple. But your private lives remain separate. 2 days and several lengthy discussions later, Olivia found herself in Julian's minimalist penthouse. A contract between them on the glass coffee table. We need ground rules, Julian said, his voice businesslike. His dark hair was perfectly styled even at this late hour, his blue eyes analytical. No emotional entanglements. Separate bedrooms. We each maintain our own social lives. Olivia nodded, her posture equally professional. I'll contribute to household expenses proportionally to my income. We'll need a convincing story about how we met and fell in love. Through Daniel, gradually overshared project interests, Julian suggested. Simple, believable, close to truth. We'll need photographs together, Olivia added. Social media evidence. Julian slid a small velvet box across the table. For appearances. The ring inside was elegant but not ostentatious. A cushion-cut diamond with a delicate band. Exactly what she would have chosen herself, which was unsettling. One more thing, Julian said as she slipped it on her finger, surprised by its perfect fit. If either of us develops genuine feelings, we disclose immediately. The arrangement ends. Agreed, Olivia said firmly. That won't be a problem. 3 weeks later, they exchanged vows at City Hall with Daniel and Julian's assistant Haley as witnesses. The kiss was brief, clinical, just business. That night, Olivia stood on the penthouse balcony, looking at the glittering city. She belonged here now, at least on paper. She could finish the Patterson Theater, build her career, all thanks to this arrangement. Having regrets already? Julian asked, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of champagne. Just contemplating the strangeness of life, she replied, accepting the glass. Thank you for doing this. Purely self-interest, he reminded her, though his smile seemed genuine. To new beginnings. Their glasses clinked softly in the night air, neither aware that their perfectly arranged plan was already developing its first hairline crack. Roommates and receipts. 3 months into their arrangement, Olivia and Julian had developed an efficient system. Their shared calendar detailed social appearances, their joint bank account managed household expenses, and a whiteboard in the kitchen tracked who had cleaned what and when. Their marriage operated with the precision of a well-oiled machine, exactly as planned. Olivia's work on the Patterson Theater was progressing beautifully. The 1920s Art Deco details were being painstakingly restored, and her innovative solutions to modernize without compromising historical integrity had earned praise from preservation societies. Julian, meanwhile, had noticed subtle changes in the board's treatment of him. Reynolds had invited him to golf, a first, and conversations about when you and Olivia might start a family had begun, making him distinctly uncomfortable. "How was your date?" Julian asked one evening as Olivia returned to the penthouse, slipping off her heels by the door as had become her habit. "Fine," she replied, though her expression suggested otherwise. "Thomas is nice, but—" "But?" she sighed, sinking onto the couch beside him. He asked where things were heading. "I hate lying to decent people," Julian nodded, understanding. His own dating life had similarly stalled. Explaining why he could only meet at certain times and never at his home required more deception than he was comfortable with. "Should we revisit the dating clause?" he suggested, closing his laptop. "Perhaps it's more trouble than it's worth." "Perhaps," she agreed. "Besides, we've established enough of a public presence as a couple." "We don't want conflicting narratives if immigration checks more closely." Their couple presence had indeed developed convincingly. Weekend brunches, theater outings, a charity gala where they danced just close enough. In photographs, they looked natural together, her auburn hair sometimes brushing his shoulder as she laughed at something he'd said. The Patterson board loved the restoration updates, Olivia mentioned, changing subjects. "Mr. Harrington asked specifically about you," Julian smiled. "Samuel's an old friend of my father's. He probably still thinks of me as the 10-year-old who knocked over his martini. He said you've changed the company's direction for the better. That William would be proud." Something flickered across Julian's face. Vulnerability, perhaps. "My father believed historical buildings told our collective story. The board preferred demolition and new construction. More profitable. But you fought for the Patterson," Olivia noted. "Why?" Julian was quiet for a moment. "I saw your presentation. The passion when you spoke about preserving cultural landmarks while making them viable for modern use. It aligned with what I always believed but hadn't articulated." The admission surprised her. "I didn't know my presentation had that effect." "You have a way of seeing beneath surfaces," Julian said, then quickly added, "professionally speaking." Later that night, Olivia woke to the sound of breaking glass. She found Julian in the kitchen, cleaning up a shattered water glass, his hands shaking slightly. "Nightmare?" she asked softly, recognizing the signs from her own experience. He nodded. My father's disappointed face. Board members laughing. The usual. Without asking, she made him chamomile tea, something her grandmother had always done for her. They sat in comfortable silence until the tension in his shoulders eased. As she headed back to her room, his voice stopped her. "Olivia, thank you. For not asking questions. That's what—" She paused, realizing she'd been about to say friends, but that wasn't quite right. They weren't really friends, were they? 3 nights later, after a particularly grueling board meeting where Julian had successfully defended the Patterson budget against cuts, they celebrated with takeout and wine on the balcony. The autumn air was crisp, the city lights reflecting in Olivia's eyes as she laughed at Julian's impression of Reynolds's perpetually disapproving expression. "I haven't laughed like this in a long time," she admitted, slightly wine-flushed. "Neither have I," Julian realized aloud. They stayed up talking until nearly 3, about architecture and art, about Prague and Julian's year studying in Paris, about dreams deferred and unexpected paths. It felt dangerous somehow. This genuine connection neither had anticipated. The following week brought an unexpected immigration check, a routine home visit that left them both rattled despite their thorough preparation. The officer had noted their separate bedrooms, which they'd explained as Olivia's preference for a cold room and Julian's occasional late work hours. That night, Julian found Olivia on the balcony, shivering slightly in the October chill. "We passed," he said, offering her his jacket. The officer was satisfied. She nodded, pulling the jacket around her shoulders. This time, he hesitated, then said, "Perhaps we should reconsider the bedroom situation. 4 appearances?" "Perhaps," she agreed quietly. Later, lying awake in her room, Olivia heard Julian pass her door on his way to his room. He paused, and she held her breath, unsure what she was hoping for or dreading. "Good night, Olivia," he whispered through the door so softly she almost missed it. Then, even softer, "I never thought this would feel like home." The words hung in the darkness long after his footsteps faded, changing everything while changing nothing at all. Cracks in the foundation. Winter descended upon New York, bringing holiday parties and family obligations that tested the boundaries of Olivia and Julian's arrangement. The first significant challenge came in the form of Julian's mother, Eleanor Westbrook, who arrived unannounced one Sunday morning. "Mother," Julian said, clearly surprised as he opened the door to find Eleanor's elegant figure standing there. "We weren't expecting you until Christmas." "Clearly," Eleanor replied, taking in Julian's casual attire and the Sunday newspaper spread across the coffee table. Her sharp eyes cataloged the space, noting the architectural journals on the side table, the Czech novel on the bookshelf, the pair of women's slippers by the sofa, evidence of cohabitation that seemed to both satisfy and concern her. Olivia emerged from the guest bathroom, freezing momentarily before composing herself. "Mrs. Westbrook, what a lovely surprise." The day unfolded in a delicate dance of polite conversation and subtle interrogation. Eleanor asked about Olivia's family in Prague, her career aspirations, how she and Julian had fallen in love. Each question felt like a test, and Olivia found herself answering with unexpected honesty about her passion for architectural preservation and her parents' small bookshop back home. "You've chosen someone quite different from your usual type, Julian," Eleanor observed over lunch. "Refreshingly so." Julian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "People change, Mother." "Indeed they do," Eleanor agreed, her gaze lingering on her son. "William always said you'd settle down when you found someone who challenged you rather than merely complimented you." After Eleanor left, a strange tension lingered between them. Julian was quieter than usual, and Olivia found herself wondering about his usual type. She didn't have to wonder long. 3 days later, at the Westbrook Development Holiday Gala, a stunning blonde approached them, eyes fixed on Julian with familiar intensity. "Julian, darling," she said, her voice honeyed and confident. "It's been too long." "Vanessa," Julian replied, his tone carefully neutral. "I wasn't aware you were back in New York." "London grew tiresome," Vanessa said with a dismissive wave. Her gaze shifted to Olivia, assessing. "And you must be the architect everyone's talking about. The one who swept our Julian off his feet so suddenly." "Olivia Novak," she confirmed, extending her hand and noting the slight emphasis on suddenly. "Julian's wife?" Vanessa's smile remained fixed. "How fascinating. Julian and I were quite serious before my London transfer. Weren't we, Jules?" That night, Olivia learned about Vanessa Laurent, Julian's ex-girlfriend of 3 years, daughter of a French hotel magnate, and apparently the woman everyone had expected him to marry. Their relationship had ended when Vanessa accepted a position in London, a career move Julian had supported despite his father's disapproval of her departure. "She's exactly what I pictured for you," Olivia admitted as they prepared for bed in their now-shared bedroom. They still maintained the facade of sleeping together while actually alternating between the bed and a premium air mattress hidden in the closet during the day. "Oh, and what's that?" Julian asked, his voice carefully light as he arranged pillows on his side of the bed. "Sophisticated, connected, born into the same world as you." Julian paused. "That was my father's picture, not mine." The Patterson Theater project hit unexpected complications in January. Water damage behind the original plasterwork threatened both the timeline and budget. Olivia spent long hours at the site, coming home exhausted to find Julian equally worn from navigating board politics that had intensified with Vanessa's return to her father's New York office and Consequently, to Westbrook Development's social circle, the immigration office called again, requesting additional documentation of their relationship. The scrutiny made sense. A foreign national marrying the CEO of a prominent company just before deportation would naturally raise flags. But the timing couldn't have been worse. They want more photographs, evidence of travel together. Testimonials from friends, Olivia said, scanning the email. They're not subtle about their suspicions. Julian rubbed his temples. We need to be more convincing. That weekend, they booked a last-minute trip to Boston, visited museums, took carefully casual photographs, and shared a hotel room with deliberate evidence of dual occupancy. They held hands as they walked through snow-dusted streets, and Olivia was surprised by how natural it felt when Julian's thumb absently stroked her palm. On their last evening, huddled in a corner booth of a historic tavern, Julian confessed, I declined Vanessa's dinner invitation 3 times this week. You didn't have to do that, Olivia said, stirring her hot cider. Our arrangement doesn't prevent you from seeing old friends. It wasn't out of obligation to our arrangement, Julian replied, meeting her eyes directly. I simply didn't want to have dinner with her. The statement hung between them, laden with unspoken implications. Before Olivia could respond, Julian's phone rang, an emergency with the Pattersons' structural supports that required immediate attention. They returned to New York earlier than planned, thrust back into their separate professional crises. Days passed with minimal interaction, both buried in work, the conversation in Boston unfinished and fading beneath immediate pressures. Valentine's Day arrived amid this strained period. They'd planned a public dinner date, necessary for appearances, but Olivia was trapped at the Patterson until nearly 10, dealing with city inspectors. When she finally arrived home, apologetic and exhausted, she found the penthouse dark except for the balcony, which glowed with string lights and candles. Julian waited there with a simple dinner kept warm, a bottle of her favorite Czech wine, and no cameras documenting the moment for immigration evidence. You didn't have to do this, she said, confused by the private display when no one was watching. I know, Julian replied. He hesitated, then admitted quietly, I'm finding it increasingly difficult to distinguish between what I have to do and what I want to do. The confession hung between them like the frost in the February air, neither willing to be the first to acknowledge what it meant for their carefully constructed arrangement. Later that night, with Julian asleep beside her, it was his turn for the bed. Olivia stared at the ceiling, remembering his whispered words months ago. I never thought this would feel like home. The truth she couldn't escape was that it felt like home to her, too, and that realization terrified her more than any immigration interview ever could. Blueprints of the Heart March brought unseasonable storms that pelted the city with sleet and freezing rain. The Patterson Theater's newly repaired roof leaked, sending Olivia into crisis management mode, while Julian navigated increasing pressure from the board to consider Vanessa's father's buyout offer for the property, an offer that would mean abandoning the restoration in favor of a luxury hotel. They don't understand what we're preserving, Olivia argued during a rare dinner together at the penthouse. It's not just a building. It's a piece of cultural history. Julian watched her pace, her passion both familiar and newly compelling each time he witnessed it. I know, he said simply. I won't let it happen. The promise felt weighted with multiple meanings. Before Olivia could respond, Julian's phone rang, his mother's ringtone. His expression changed as he listened, a mask of control slipping to reveal genuine alarm. What hospital? He asked, already reaching for his keys. I'm on my way. Eleanor had suffered a minor stroke. The prognosis was good, but the event itself was terrifying. Julian spent that night at the hospital, returning home briefly the next morning to shower and change. Olivia found him standing in the bedroom, staring blankly at his closet, as if the simple act of selecting clothing had become incomprehensible. Without words, she selected a comfortable sweater and trousers, set them on the bed, and then simply wrapped her arms around him. He stood rigid for a moment before melting into the embrace, his forehead coming to rest on her shoulder. She's the only parent I have left, he whispered. Vulnerability raw in his voice. I know, Olivia said softly. And you won't lose her. Not today. She accompanied him back to the hospital, where Eleanor's sharp eyes missed nothing despite her weakened state. You actually love her, Eleanor murmured to Julian when Olivia stepped out to find coffee. That was unexpected. Julian didn't deny it. The following weeks brought a new rhythm to their lives. Julian split his time between the hospital, physical therapy appointments, and work. Olivia juggled the Patterson emergency repairs with helping coordinate Eleanor's eventual return home. Their manufactured relationship was tested not by immigration officials, but by real-life crisis, and they found themselves relying on each other in ways neither had anticipated. One evening, as Julian reviewed medical insurance paperwork at the dining table, Olivia placed a cup of tea beside him and hesitated before saying, I called my parents today. About your mother? He looked up, surprised. You did? She nodded. They send their wishes for her recovery. My father had a similar episode 2 years ago. You never mentioned that, Julian said, realizing how little he knew about her family despite living with her for months. It was before we met, Olivia said. Then more softly, before this arrangement? Is he all right now? Yes. The rehabilitation was difficult, but he's back to running the bookshop. She smiled slightly. They're actually quite curious about you. What have you told them? About us? Olivia's gaze dropped to her hands. More truth than fiction lately. The admission hung between them, neither willing to examine it too closely. April brought Eleanor home from the hospital and the Patterson project back on schedule. With professional crises temporarily stabilized, the underlying personal one could no longer be ignored. Their arrangement had evolved beyond recognition, with boundaries blurred and rules forgotten. Julian found Olivia on their balcony one evening, reviewing structural plans for the theater's final phase. The spring air was cool but pleasant, carrying the promise of renewal. We need to talk, he said, joining her. About the terms of our agreement. Olivia set the plans aside, her expression carefully neutral. Which terms specifically? The one about disclosure if feelings develop. Her breath caught. Julian, my mother saw it, he continued. Vanessa suspected it. Even Reynolds commented on how I light up when you call. That doesn't necessarily mean I wake up every third night on that ridiculous air mattress, Julian interrupted. And I find myself watching you sleep before I remember I'm not supposed to feel anything. Olivia stood abruptly. This is exactly why we had that clause. Proximity creates false intimacy. Living together, facing crises together, it manufactures connection. Is that what you believe this is? Manufactured? It has to be, she insisted. Our entire relationship is built on a lie. Not everything, Julian argued. Not the way I reach for you first when something happens, good or bad. Not the fact that you know exactly how to make my tea or that I've memorized which architectural journals you've already read. Olivia shook her head. Julian, please. In a few months, the Patterson will be finished. Your position with the board is secure. We can dissolve this arrangement as planned and what? Pretend these months never happened? Go back to being strangers? We were always supposed to be strangers who helped each other out, Olivia reminded him, voice strained. That was the deal. Julian stepped closer. The deal has changed for me. Has it changed for you? Before she could answer, his phone rang. The hospital. Eleanor had experienced complications and was being readmitted. The conversation remained unfinished as they rushed back to crisis mode. Both grateful for and resentful of the interruption that delayed a truth neither was ready to fully face. Building something real. By June, Eleanor was recovering steadily. The Patterson Theater was weeks from its grand reopening, and the immigration office had finally closed their investigation into Julian and Olivia's marriage, satisfied by the evidence accumulated over nearly a year of life together. Everything was proceeding according to their original plan, which made the letter in Olivia's hand all the more devastating. An exceptional talent visa, she explained when Julian found her staring at the official document. Based on my work with the Patterson and recommendations from the Historical Preservation Society. It's what I originally applied for before. Before our arrangement, Julian absorbed this, his expression unreadable. So you no longer need our marriage to stay in the country? No, she confirmed. I don't. The timing was almost elegant in its cruelty. Just as they'd begun to acknowledge the shifting nature of their relationship, its foundational purpose vanished. What remained was a question neither seemed prepared to answer. Without necessity, what were they to each other? The Pattersons' grand reopening approached like a ticking clock. They moved through their days with careful politeness, the unfinished balcony conversation hanging between them. Julian threw himself into work, Olivia into the theater's final details. They slept in separate rooms again, the pretense of shared space abandoned now that no immigration officers would appear. 3 days before the Pattersons' gala opening, Olivia came home to find moving boxes in the entryway. "What's this?" she asked, heart constricting at the sight. Julian emerged from his office looking exhausted. "I thought it might be easier." After the gala. "A clean break?" "I see," Olivia said, her voice impressively steady despite the earthquake beneath her feet. "That's practical." "Practical," Julian echoed, a strange bitterness in the word. "Yes, that's us. Practical arrangement, practical solution, practical separation. Isn't that what we agreed to?" Olivia challenged, anger rising to mask the pain. "From the beginning, no emotional entanglements. A business arrangement with a clear end date. And if I told you I broke that rule months ago?" Julian demanded. "If I admitted I've been struggling with feelings that have nothing to do with practicality and everything to do with waking up wanting to see your face?" "I'd say you're confusing gratitude and convenience with something deeper," Olivia replied, hating the words even as she spoke them. "We helped each other through difficult times. That creates attachment. But it's not—" "Don't tell me what I feel," Julian interrupted, voice low and intense. "I've spent my life being told what I should want, who I should be. I know the difference between convenience and love." The word hung in the air between them, impossible to take back. Olivia stared at him, heart racing. "You don't love me. You love having someone who understands your world, who fits into your life without disrupting it. Is that what you think? That you haven't disrupted everything?" Julian laughed, a sound without humor. "You've completely dismantled every plan, every expectation. And I'm terrified because I don't want to rebuild without you." Before she could respond, his phone rang, the theater management with an emergency about the gala preparations. Another conversation interrupted, another truth deferred. The night of the Patterson Theater's grand reopening arrived with all the glamour of a bygone era. Restored to its 1920s glory but subtly updated for modern use, the building stood as testament to what could be preserved while embracing the future. Olivia's vision had been realized in every detail, from the refurbished marquee to the Art Deco flourishes that caught the light just so. Julian watched her from across the crowded lobby, radiant in a vintage-inspired gown that echoed the theater's aesthetic. She was in her element, graciously accepting congratulations from preservation committee members and architectural journalists. Tomorrow she would begin packing her things. Their arrangement had served its purpose for both of them. The practical conclusion would be to shake hands and part ways. Practical. The word had become poison to him. Eleanor appeared at his side, remarkably recovered, though still moving carefully with her cane. "You're being remarkably stupid," she informed him bluntly. "Excuse me?" "That woman," Eleanor said, nodding toward Olivia, "has accomplished something extraordinary here. She's brilliant, kind, and clearly in love with you, though God knows why, given your current behavior." Julian blinked. "Mother, I don't think—" "Exactly. You're not thinking. You're hiding behind practicality because you're afraid." "Of what?" "Of admitting that the best thing that ever happened to you began as a lie." Eleanor patted his arm. "The beginning doesn't determine the ending, Julian. Your father and I began as a business merger of old family fortunes. We found love later. Sometimes the foundations shift, but that doesn't mean the building isn't sound." Across the room, Olivia excused herself from a conversation and slipped through a side door. Julian followed, finding her in the theater's magnificent main hall, standing center stage in the dimmed house lights, looking up at the restored ceiling mural of stars and mythological figures. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said without turning. The original artist's great-granddaughter helped with the restoration. Continuity across generations. Julian moved to stand beside her. It's breathtaking. Just like the woman who made it possible. She turned to him then, eyes suspiciously bright. I couldn't have done it without your support. Your belief in the project when the board wanted luxury condos instead. Olivia, Julian began, then faltered. Start with truth, he decided. I've been thinking about what happens tomorrow. Me too, she admitted. It's strange, isn't it? Ending something that began as temporary but somehow became the most real thing in my life. Julian finished when she trailed off. She met his gaze finally, vulnerability clear in her expression. Julian, I don't want boxes in the entryway, he interrupted. I don't want practical solutions or clean breaks. I want morning coffee and architectural journals spread across the dining table. I want to argue about restoration philosophy and board politics and whose turn it is to cook. Olivia's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you. Not because it's convenient or because we've been playing at marriage, but because somewhere between immigration interviews and hospital visits and late nights on the balcony, I discovered that home isn't the penthouse. It's wherever you are. Tears spilled down her cheeks now. We built this on a lie. No, Julian disagreed gently. We built the foundation on necessity. Everything since, every real laugh, every genuine conversation, every moment of trust, that's been truth. And I want to keep building if you'll stay. I got the visa, she reminded him, voice wavering. I don't need the marriage anymore. Then marry me again, Julian said simply. For real this time. No contracts, no arrangements. Just us, building something that will last. Olivia closed the distance between them, her hand coming to rest over his heart. I broke the rule too, you know. Months ago. I just couldn't admit it, even to myself. And now? She smiled through her tears. Now I'm wondering why we're wasting time talking when you could be kissing me under these beautifully restored stars. As Julian pulled her close, their lips meeting in a kiss that held promise rather than pretense, the theater around them stood as testament to what they both now understood, that sometimes the most enduring structures begin with unexpected foundations, and that love, like architecture, requires both solid grounding and the courage to reach for the stars. In the soft glow of the restored theater lights, what had begun as a paper arrangement had transformed into something neither had designed, but both had helped build. A love story written not in contracts but in whispers, not in obligations but in choices, and all the stronger for having weathered the storms of doubt to emerge. Finally, gloriously real.